You're listening to the Visionary Lifestyle Podcast, the show that's dedicated to raising consciousness and empowering you to activate your highest potential. I'm your host, Magda Freedom Rod. Greetings, Rainbow Warriors. I'm coming to you from Morocco today, where I'm doing daily yoga and learning to surf. I'm feeling so blessed to be in a place where I can connect with nature daily and still be connected enough to bring you the weekly show. Our guest today is Jeffrey Armstrong. Jeffrey is an award-winning poet and best-selling author of numerous books, including Spiritual Teachings of the Avatar, Ancient Wisdom for a New World. Jeffrey is a relationship expert, philosopher, practitioner, and teacher of the Vedas for over 40 years. Prior to his teaching, he had a successful career as an executive in Silicon Valley and then spent 5 years in an ashram as a brahmacharya or monk. He's a sought-after guest expert on TV and talk radio. For 15 years, he was a corporate executive in Silicon Valley and a speaker for Fortune 500 companies and was written about regularly in USA Today, The Wall Street Journal, LA Times, Discover Magazine, CNN, and many others. Previously trained as a monk in the traditional way for 5 years, he also has degrees in psychology, history and comparative religion, and English literature. For the past 40 plus years and currently as the media and communications director for both the Vedic Friends Association and the Hindu Collective Initiative for North America, he's been a global advocate for the Hindu Sanatan Dharma culture and has spoken at some of the world's most prestigious universities, conferences, and corporations around the world. I caught up with Jeffrey at the Bali Spirit Festival, where he was offering teachings for yogic thought leaders. He grabbed my attention right away with that one, and gratefully, I got to spend some valuable time with him picking his enormous brain to learn how we can all be yogic thought leaders. I love this conversation, and I promise you it's jam-packed with wisdom that is highly useful. The thing that stands out to me most of all that Jeffrey and I spoke about is the notion of vrittis, the fluctuations of the mind, and how yoga is the practice that dissolves them. Jeffrey offers life-changing yoga philosophy and lifestyle courses on his website, so make sure to check those out. As always, links are in the show notes. Enjoy and namaste. Jeffrey Armstrong, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Namaste.
Namaste, as we say in India.
That's right.
My favorite thing about India was every hello was a namaste.
Isn't that wonderful?
It's so wonderful. I want to live in that world all the time, right?
I said that almost 50 years ago.
Beautiful. So you are quite the expert on yoga. It's a real treat to sit down and pick your immense brain on the subject. As we've been talking a little bit, I'm on a mission to help people expand their awareness of what it means to be a yogi and what true yoga is. And I see you as having vast knowledge in this. You are doing yoga thought leader trainings, right?
Yes.
We're building an army of yogic thought leaders, and I'm really on a mission to find a better word than army.
Yes, well, they don't have guns, they have funds.
Oh, that's cute.
They're fundamentalists.
Fundamental yogis. Yeah, so what is a yogi? Let's start there.
Well, the simplest way to say it would be, it is one who recognizes that they're an immortal being visiting a material realm, and that in the process they are also trying to reconnect with all the sources of everything, hence yoga meaning to connect. Mm-hmm. So you could say that we have one state where we're forgetful, disconnected, and lost in the material world. And by becoming a yogi, we become reconnected to the sources of everything, aware again of who we really are as an immortal divine being, and we live that lifestyle. We live a lifestyle that supports staying in that consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Yes, a lifestyle. This is something that I always want to bring awareness to. And something I often say when I'm teaching my students is yoga is not just a class you come to once a week. This is a lifestyle.
That's right.
Live, eat, breathe, be yoga.
It's a way of
all
being.
yoga. It's a way of being.
Very much so.
Right. So what is the goal of yoga?
Well, in terms of what we just said, then there would be three goals. One is to inhabit this body and have this experience of being in the material world, in the realm of matter, something which yoga says we chose. So think of it from yoga's perspective. We're from a realm where no one dies, and this is the realm where everything dies, everything is temporary. And at a certain point we said, I'd like to go visit there and see what that's like. And so we came here. We're not evil for doing so. We're not bad or wrong for doing so. But we forget as soon as we get here, because we start at the bottom of the species and work toward human. So we get what I call I-amnesia. We forget who I am.
I-amnesia. That's a good one. I love that.
So in the simplest sense, yoga begins with the recognition that we should feel awkward being here. We die, but we don't want to. We get sick, but we don't want to. Life is stressful in a myriad of ways that are challenging to us. So obviously we're supposed to think about why we're here. So yoga begins with that self-inquiry. Who am I really? What is this place where I am? And what should I do about it? So rather than just running away from it, we should then find out how to live within matter in the most reasonable way. And therefore there are right and not so right things to do, because everything in matter is based on cause and effect.
Which is?
In Sanskrit, the word is karma. One thing leads to another, or is connected to another. Hip bone's connected to the thigh bone, and so on.
Right.
And the more we know how things work here, the better everything works for us while we're here. We're not evil for being here, therefore it's not also evil to study how to be here. So I like to say the universe is a university. But we're all students here, and Namaste is recognizing another student.
Yes.
By the fact that they're conscious. Includes all creatures, all beings of all kinds, plants, animals, everything. They're all like us, just in different bodies.
Right.
So, along with then coming to terms with being here and trying to do so more skillfully, it would also be to leave the park so it's in a usable, or the school so it's in a usable form for future generations.
Yes, please.
Pretty polite thing to do.
Sure.
We get it. We get it. We go to a hotel, don't burn the building down, don't carve your name in the table or the walls. So we're kind of doing that to the planet right now.
Yes, indeed.
And so yogis try not to do that. And then ultimately, iti phone home. We're from somewhere else. And the yogic idea is that it's up through the light and beyond it, through what we see as light and beyond it, is where we came from. So the final stage of yoga is moksha, which means freedom. Ultimate freedom from anything that might bind us.
And what binds us is known as?
Well, there are different terms for it, but mostly it's not knowing who we are.
Ignorance about who we are.
The word is avidya in Sanskrit, and vidya means knowledge. And there's a library of knowledge that has been traveling in the country we now call India. Their real name is Bharat. The real name for the country of India is Bharat.
Oh, that's news.
Yeah, B-H-A-R-A-T. That's their name. And when someone colonizes a country, it's usually their habit, or a person, to give them a new name so that they forget their past. So there is no such thing as India, but there is Bharat, B-H-A-R-A-T. Ba-ra-ta. And Bha, B-H-A, is to be. It's a state of being. And it's also from Brahman, so it means brilliance and immortal brilliance. Then Ra means romance. and desire. And then ta means the beat of the drum and music. So theater in India is called Bharat Natyam, to dance a play. So the dancing, romantic, seeking the light culture is Bharat.
Wow.
Bharata.
So how did it turn into India?
Well, the British took it over and gave it another name so they would lose their identity. Because that's what colonizing is all about.
Sure.
You take away people's identity and then they become like you and they don't fight you. So that's why we've lost Bharat, and even India has temporarily lost being Bharat because they're recovering from being colonized.
Oh, well, thank God they're recovering. We're going in the right direction now.
A symptom of their recovery is us getting yoga.
Right. So yoga's moved to the West now, as we're well aware.
That's right.
Right.
Which either could be part of that colonization, depending on how we do it. If we say, well, kind of it's ours and it's just whatever I want it to be and I can define it however I want. Or we could say, oh, we've been given this great gift. Let's unwrap it carefully and find out what's really inside. What is yoga really?
This is the question.
Isn't
this
it?
is the conversation.
Yeah.
What is yoga really?
It's very exciting.
And this is what you teach.
I do. Because there's a lot of people doing a marvelous job of the preliminary steps of asana, which is re-embodiment, you could say, correct embodiment. Pranayama, which is part of correct embodiment, and also make sure that we have enough vitality flowing through our system to support everything that we're going to try to do. Live longer, live better, cooperate with nature. And then the yams and niyams are just a little formalized way of saying what we said about cause and effect. That there's a right way to eat, a right way to sleep, or a best way to do all of those things, both for your own body type and in general. And there are outcomes that are produced by those activities, and if you want your consciousness to be clear and restored to its original condition, then there's a way of life that goes with that. Going out and getting drunk every night is guaranteed not to support that, for sure. And drug usage, just as a way of being in a certain state of consciousness, is contradictory to trying to stay in the right state of consciousness all the time by understanding and by activity. So the yams and niyams are lifestyle, and what we're going to see soon is, and we already are seeing in some, lifestyle experts, doulas, nutritionists, people who are yogis, practicing asana and pranayama, and they're also becoming a specialist in some of those lifestyle practices so they can help other people to live a more healthy life.
Right. That's what I do.
Is it?
Yeah.
Isn't that's wonderful?
I call myself a lifestyle guide.
There you go.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, a healthy Sherpa, someone to lead you up the mountain of life so that you don't fall into the valley, and break your leg, or.
Yeah, and I'm forever a student too. I consider myself a teacher, but I'm even more than I'm a teacher. I'm a student.
Yes.
Because I want to keep, learning, and that's part of the reason for this podcast as well, for me to learn and share what I'm learning with others.
For all of us, it's the perpetual process. There's always someone who knows more than you, and then there's someone who knows less. And you show your gratitude to those who knew more and gave it to you by passing it on. And yet you remain always hungry for the parts that you don't understand yet yourself.
Right.
And humility happens naturally in between the two. In the patience of teaching, you have to be humble. And in the patience and honoring of receiving, you also have to be humble.
Right.
Humility is the way we learn.
Right.
But also hunger. It is a hunger.
Yeah, it's both.
Yeah,
So-
without that fire burning, we don't want it enough.
Right. Third chakra, right? It's
Yeah, and it's even a part of yoga, since we started there, is the relocating of the fire of digestion from the belly only, which is where it lives in the animal kingdom, or in the genitals only. So the way yogis talk about animals lovingly is their main activities are eating, sleeping, mating, and fighting. So we're supposed to move the fire of life from eating, sleeping, mating, and fighting to a higher level and ask the question, who am I really? What is this ultimately all about, this experience we're having here? Is it designed? If so, for what purpose? What am I supposed to be here learning? What's the outcome of all of this? Who am I really? Why do I want immortality and everything around me, including me, seems to be dying?
Right.
So this leads us to the other 4 limbs of yoga, which our society hasn't generally headed into yet. But it is Ashtanga yoga that so many people are practicing. 8 specific branches or limbs, as they're called.
Right, laid out in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras.
Laid out in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras and in the many texts, Jaranda Samhita and the many other yogic texts that arose over history. Patanjali's Yoga Sutras is perhaps the most famous of the formalized yoga texts that includes all the key components, kind of like a nutrition guide. To get all your right nutrients as a yogi, you should do this, this, and this.
Right, right.
8 limbs.
Right, and the goal of yoga being to, I guess there's different ways to, probably infinite ways to really answer that question, what the goal of yoga is, or we could go really deep on it, but to try to simplify it for the people that are listening who, we don't really have all day for this conversation, right?
Right.
But as we spoke about just earlier before we started recording, it's to remove the vrittis, right?
Right, so let's just say that there's traps in the material world. We can understand this easily enough because trappers used to do just that. They would set traps to catch animals. Some still do. So imagine that they're psychological traps that live inside of us that are desire traps. And some of them have been set by us seeing something that we really want, and now we're driven by that. But it's no coincidence that the modern English word, coming from the Sanskrit word vritti, or a desire that's running and controlling you, that vritti word gave us the word advertisement. So we know that people in Wall Street are being paid to write a commercial that makes you want something unconsciously and uncontrollably. That's a vritti. An unconscious, uncontrollable desire for something, whether it leads you to good or bad, is a vritti. It's called a little whirlpool, and a vortex, and you stand on it, same word, vri, and it goes, and it makes you dizzy, and you are dizzy, and the only thing you know for sure is I want that car, or that food, or that person, or whatever it is. That's a vritti. So yoga says those vrittis are controlling our lives through our consciousness, and yoga is to remove all of them. And at the bottom of that pile should be our true self.
Sounds like a worthy goal, right? The practice of yoga being the path to get us there, which is freedom, right?
It leads to our freedom from being bound in everyone else's control mechanisms and desires. And just think of the way it is to be controlled or addicted to anything. Most everyone's had at least a feeling of being addicted to something, even if it's sugar.
Sure.
So, to be controlled by that and have to have it takes away your freedom of action. To suddenly just need a couple of meals a day of reasonable food, and that's all, and to be otherwise happy within and have no compelling desires that are driving you, it's a much more economical way to live, a peaceful way to live. And you may still desire things, but perhaps you append something and say, I'll never go after a desire if it would cause harm to myself or others. Now you're a yogi. You don't have to,
ahimsa.
Ahimsa, which doesn't mean non-violence, because we have to do some to live. A little bit. But it means doing the least violence by doing what you must do, what you're here to do. Which is one of the other questions of yoga. What am I here to do?
Right.
What are we here to learn in this university?
This university, I love it.
We're gathering experience, that's one thing. But we've all looked around right now at the world. If you've been watching for a while, we can see that if we're not careful, we destroy the world we were trying to enjoy.
Yep, pretty rapidly.
Pretty quickly, we destroy other people's enjoyment. make them very unhappy, then they make it their point to make us very unhappy. It's got to be a better way to do it
Sure.
than that.
The yogic way.
The yogic way,
Yeah.
which is namaste first.
Right.
Even if I disagree with you, namaste first.
The light in me acknowledges the light in you.
I'll tell you the Sanskrit. It's 3 words. Na means not. Na. And ma means me. And te means you. So it actually means, this is one of those moments when it's not me, but it's you. I'm showing you respect.
Right.
As what you said, as a divine being. And in that moment, you look back at me and say, oh, same to you, namaste. I see you as a divine being in there. Not just as your gender, not just as your race, not just as your nationality or your politics or your ideas. I see the real you inside there. We have that moment together. Likely, if you do that all the time, there'll be a pause before you go to have a fight with someone and you'll say, let's not fight.
Right. There's a better way.
There's a better way.
I see the true you, you see the true me. What are we doing with all this?
Let's think about this
baloney?
and come back to it.
Right. Yeah.
Rather than punch it out.
Right. Yeah, no, we don't need that. Yeah, so ahimsa is something that I really like to bring awareness to as a foundation of the yogic lifestyle. So doing as little harm as possible, and I appreciate that you point out that we do need, it does require some harm to live. If we walk across the grass, inevitably we are squishing some, sentient beings that are underneath the grass, right?
That's part of it. The other part is some people, some atmas, decide at this particular moment to be unpleasant and violent and hurtful just because they can. So for those, there are policemen or protectors or whatever you want. And if you were a policeman and you put on a gun every day, then your goal for the use of that weapon should be to protect the innocent. So it may be you have to kill someone that day, even though everyone's immortal, but you may have to actually harm someone that day to protect the innocent. So that's ahimsa for the policeman.
Interesting.
The desire to not ever have to do that, to exhaust every means of controlling the situation without causing harm, to go right to that edge, and then only to cause harm if the person you're having to harm, killing the innocent, harming children, harming elderly, you have a choice. Someone's poisoning the well, which is going to poison the whole village, and you have to stop them.
Right, like we see at Standing Rock, for example.
Places like that.
Yeah.
So that kind of violence is not the kind of violence that we do casually and just inflict harm on everyone unconsciously. So that's still considered ahimsa.
Interesting. Okay, I hadn't thought about it in those terms. That's good to understand that. We touched on a little bit earlier also the voice, and how you're talking about how important it is for those who are yogic thought leaders to be developing their voice properly and using their voice properly.
Yes, because yoga is actually considered in Bharata and in India, the place it came from, to be a very unique discipline, because you'll notice yogis often go out in the woods alone in India. And this means yoga is the stage where you find your autonomy in a cosmological setting, in a very wide cosmological setting. So that means that your individuality is being highly stressed in yoga. It's being brought out. And the result of that, the outcome of that, is that you become much more individualistic. Therefore, it's necessary when you empower someone to be more powerful and individualized, that you also teach them respect for all life. So yoga has as its first principle, before you learn to have powers that are greater than most, they're called siddhis, before you learn that, you must promise not to cause harm with that and take advantage of others with those powers through selfishness. And so yoga begins with that kind of nonviolent promise. I promise I won't hurt others with my increased freedom.
And then where does the voice come in?
Well, the voice then comes in as the most everyday useful power that yogis have, because with it, they can talk to others, and by talking in the right way, they can invoke their reasonable side, or their loving side, or their divine side. So it turns out that about the only way to accomplish what we do in society for yogis is to do so by having reasonable conversations. So what I like to say is, there are many religions that forcibly try to convert people. In yoga, there's no conversion, and there's no coercion, but there's a lot of conversation. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, using sound vibration and one's voice to be an agent of change in a world that's hurting itself is the most compassionate thing that a yogi can do. And it's disruptive only in that it brings up the truths that are being forgotten. Mm-hmm. But it has no other aggressive intentions.
Right.
So learning to speak that way is one of the skills that all yoga teachers should try to develop.
Yes, I so completely agree, and your words are resonating deeply with me. I want to take a sound bite out of what you just said. That was perfect. Yeah, because this is very much the place that I'm in. This is what drives me very much, and this is why I'm using the platform as a podcast, is because it is literally the voice, and trying to be the voice of change and inspire others to be the change as well. I struggle sometimes with feeling like I might be coming off as judgmental, or sometimes people come up with resistance, right? They feel judged.
Yes, of course.
Whether or not, certainly not my intention, right? So choosing the right words and the right tone, I struggle with this. Any tips?
Yes. This word, the word judgment has been injured very much in English in the last few years because it was misused. People are confusing judgment with prejudice. Mm-hmm. So if there was a jury who sentenced a criminal before they heard the case, that's prejudice. It's called prejudice. Mm-hmm. Before there was evidence, you made your decision. That's judgmental. Mm-hmm. It's actually prejudicial. Mm-hmm. Whereas good judgment means to decide the path that is the best for yourself and everyone. The other word that goes with good judgment or judgment is discernment. Mm-hmm. Which is the ability to tell one thing from another. So if someone's about to drink poison, and you can discern that there's poison in that for them, by pointing that out, you could be accused of being judgmental for the maker of whatever that poison might be. But on the other hand, you could be the protector of this person, and so your discernment, your judgment that may be poisonous for you, take a second look. Mm-hmm. Is not being used to diminish or harm or make less the person that you're talking to. Mm-hmm. This is a very sensitive subject right now for people.
Sure.
And as a result, what we as yogis try to do is find out if the person wants to have a conversation with us. Mm-hmm. And this is the secret. We have to find a way to invoke or attract them to wanting to have a conversation. Mm-hmm. That word attract is the word Krishna.
How so?
The word Krishna means the most attractive being.
Oh, okay.
So, if as a yogi, you get in contact within your heart with the source of everything, Krishna, that being who's the most attractive, is simply the ultimate supreme being. Mm-hmm. That's the definition. Mm. So if you get in touch with Krishna, you can't force anyone to try to know about Krishna, because Krishna does that by attraction. Mm-hmm. So the final goal of yoga can't be forced, but we can learn to be skillful enough to attract people to it. It's kind of like this. If I have a ring, like this one, and if I try to force it upon you and say, here, look at this,
right.
The more I push it on you, the more you wish I would go away.
Right.
It's just human nature.
Right.
But if I do this, cover it with my hand, look at it and go, ooh, oh my. It's like when Sally met Harry. Mm-hmm. It's the orgasm in the restaurant. And nearby, the lady says, I'll have what she's having.
Right.
So yogis should be having this, I want to have that experience too, kind of experience.
Yeah.
And our ecstasy and joy and composure, and contentment and joyfulness.
Yeah, just being it and role modeling it so that others say, I want what she has.
I want some of that too. So we get the microphone as yogis by embodying these things, not by manipulating the conversation. People can tell if they're being manipulated. But attraction is irresistible.
Yeah, being Krishna. I love that.
Being Krishna-like. And so that's where the word charisma comes from in English.
Oh, really?
From the word Krishna.
Okay, so being charismatic, Krishna-like.
That's it.
I love it.
If you do your practices and if you have just overflowing with divine love, it's going to be attractive.
Sure. Yay. Okay, I love that. So for those, I'm just thinking about my listeners and not sure what the demographic is and how many people are just starting on the yogic path, just attracted to yoga, or how many are fully on the yogic path. One of the things that I feel very called to do is to switch the lights on for people, to get them into yoga. You know, like when I have someone show up to my classes and it's their first yoga class ever, I'm like, yay, let me show you this world, right? For those maybe just starting on the yogic path, what advice would you have?
Well, what I have found, and I've loved learning all my life, so again and again I've experienced this, is that with each new subject there's a vocabulary that goes with the subject of new words that are specialized to that. All my life I rode and trained horses. I was raised in a horseback riding family. And in my first relationship, my first 20-year marriage, my wife was a British trained equestrian at the Olympic level of jumping and dressage. So quickly you find, if you work with something like horses, that the hoof and the withers and the this and the that, and the bridle and the bit and the lead rope, these are just words you need to move through that environment. So it is with yoga, that yoga and all of the learning that came from Bharata, from India, all that learning is in a language called Sanskrit, in a library of knowledge called the Veda. So yogis should begin learning new Sanskrit words from day one of their yogic learning and add new words that don't exist in English on a regular basis. So the Sanskrit word, for example, for who we all really are, is we are the Atma, A-T-M-A. Now that gave us the English word atomic, which means a small particle of something. They thought at first the smallest irreducible particle, but then we cut the atom. But Atma means uncuttable.
Indivisible.
Indivisible. Then the next thing it means, the word adamant comes from that, and so does a diamond. From Atma. So it means uncuttable, unbreakable, beautiful, immortal. So what is our true self? It's luminous, conscious, beautiful, not from here just visiting, invisible, indivisible, individual, and it's called the Atma. So now, with that word, when we look at another being and see that shining out of them, from out of their body and mind, we see their Atma. Yoga is to help us see ourselves as the Atma all the time and others. Now that we know what to call it, it's not the same as soul, because Atma is immortal, whereas the soul in Judaism and Christianity and Islam has only one lifetime and then goes down or up. But Atma doesn't have that. There's no hell for Atma. There's just next life, next life, next life, next life. And when we're done with going to school and the university, we go back where we came from.
Could be the eternal soul, no? Couldn't it? Couldn't
It could
Atma
be.
Also called the
But
eternal soul?
Atma means eternal. So you don't even need to say it.
Yeah.
But you could.
I just think of soul as a way to help people grasp it, you know, because soul is familiar.
Yes, but it's wrong meaning. It's Christian. And Christian souls only have one lifetime.
Okay.
So Atma doesn't mean that.
Okay.
Atma means you never were born and you cannot die, and you're from the realm of Brahman, the transcendental. You're visiting the material world, and your Atma is the one who came on that journey and will go back whenever you're ready at the end of the journey. So by calling it Atma, you don't confuse it with another belief system, with no disrespect intended. It's just they really aren't synonyms. Okay. One means one thing and one means another. And it's exactly by using the correct Sanskrit word that we convert over to its exact meaning.
Okay. Thank you. That's useful. So starting with vocabulary, is there some resource that people can go to, can utilize? And you're a teacher of these things,
Sure.
for one.
Well, all these books, like Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the sutras are made up of Sanskrit words. So yoga teachers being sensitized to this would begin to learn more of these words themselves. And then they would say, oh yeah, that's karma. Karma means the following. There's different stages. There's actually 4 kinds of karma, not just one kind.
Yeah, these teachings are deep.
Yeah, they're deep. But they're also fun in the same way that having more knowledge is more enjoyable. It's also more precise, and it allows you to say, yes, that's old karma. That action just created some new karma. This one is just itching. If I follow it, I'll probably create some karma. It was a vritti probably planted there by some advertiser.
Oh, man.
And so on.
Yeah.
But what the words do is they clear up confusion. So because we're doing this first almost instinctively, everyone has done asana first, and you know this very well. It should be that the order of the limbs of yoga are yam, niyam, asana, and pranayam. But nobody's learning that way.
Yeah, certainly not in the West.
No, in the West they're not perfecting their lifestyle first and then doing asana. So they've actually reversed the order and they're doing asana, pranayam,
Right.
but not necessarily making their lifestyle as perfect as it needs to be a yogi. The danger is the powers coming from asana and pranayam could get distorted by still drinking and using drugs and doing other kinds of things that would be harmful. So the more it's possible that someone can have clear guidance in these areas and get a vocabulary, then they're more likely to stay in balance as they develop in their yoga.
Right. So where can people go for that?
Well, it's true they can go to teachers like myself. They can also look carefully for those translations of books like Patanjali's Yoga Sutras where the author explains the words so that you can make the vocabulary your own.
Yeah, so yeah, really studying the philosophy. Right?
Studying the philosophy and reading books in proportion with what your practice is. In other words, if you're doing a practice, also have a book that you're reading and try to find teachers of both. If you know an asana teacher who doesn't yet know the knowledge component, then have 2 teachers or 2 sources. One for the knowledge learning and one for the practice learning.
So what would be the logical next step for people either already on the path or just maybe dipping their toe in? What's the next logical step?
Well, I think by now everyone has heard of kirtan, where we do chanting and often have beautiful music along with it, and know how exciting that is. If they're doing yoga, they probably also heard mantras and kirtan. Kirtan is something that developed in a particular kind of yoga called bhakti. Bhakti yoga is the favorite of those people who have very big emotions. Imagine like our friends in Italy. You always get this feeling like, Pisano, you're my friend, hey, come and have a dinner with me.
Right.
You feel like they're operating out of their emotions quite a bit. You feel big emotions and more emotions and kind of, yummy that way.
Yeah.
So that's a kind of yoga. It's linking back to the source of everything via your emotions, because you're a more emotional person than others might be. So that's healthy for everyone because we all have emotions. And if you have less emotions, then it would be good for you to do one of the other yogas, Ashtanga yoga or something, but then cultivate kirtan and mantras so that you opened your emotions. Then from emotional yoga you would benefit. Then there's action yoga, which is called karma yoga, the yoga of doing. A lot of people like this because it makes them feel they're changing the world in positive ways.
Yes.
So going out in the world and doing something and that makes a difference, you can measure that difference. You can say, I fed 100 people today.
Right.
My partner Sandy and I have a food program and we feed people once a month, sometimes 2,000 people in one morning. And you get a very tangible feeling from that. So the get things done part of you does karma yoga. Changes the world by action, divine action.
Yes.
And the last part is for thinking people, or for the thinking part of people, and it's the one we've been talking about a little bit today, which is knowledge makes your thinking more clear. It makes your words more exact and precise. And so if we were a bird, one of our wings would be bhakti, emotion, and one of our wings would be karma, or action. And all of yoga would be the rest of our body, but the knowledge yoga would be our tail feathers by which we decide where we're going. So really, all yogis should be cultivating those as they go. Some kind of action in the world, which people are more inclined to see and do. Help something or someone. Bigger emotions, that's being taken care of pretty well by the many kirtan groups that are out there. But knowledge people are a little more afraid of because they have this fear that if they cultivate knowledge, they're becoming dry and intellectual and abstract. Not with yogic knowledge. It actually gives us names for the things we're doing, lets us define who we really are a little more exactly than most English words can do, and it gives us a support of a library of knowledge that empowers us. And if we want to become a consultant like you have, that extra knowledge in the library, Ayurvedic medicine, Vedic astrology, all kinds of other things, they actually give us other knowing that allows us to turn yoga into a way of life. So this knowledge component has naturally been neglected a little bit at the beginning, but it is time to bring it in. And this is why here at the Bali Fest, I was teaching what I call Yoga Thought Leader Program.
I love this.
And this is the part where I'm convinced that all the people waking up into some form of yoga, and waking up's a good word. We just fall asleep and forget who we are, then we wake back up.
Yes.
So think of it lovingly and gently, not critically.
Right.
And if someone's asleep, just nudge them like you would gently and say, time to wake up, come on, wake.
Yeah.
And then they go, oh, thank you. So yogic thought leaders are the next step. And for that, they need thoughts and actions and emotions and an embodiment of the truth, which Ashtanga Yoga is so beautifully giving. So I believe that without it all being critical, this is just the logical next step. In the same way that we go from children, mostly in our body, and as we get older, we develop a balance between our mind and our emotions and our body and our actions and our senses. So we're at that stage, and we certainly can see that the world needs us to be at that stage.
Indeed. Yes.
Many of us have a deep wounded part of us in grief to see so much hurt and suffering in the world. So I would like to say this is an opportunity for all the yogis to think of themselves as volunteering to do something significant with their life. It's an opportunity to serve in, as you said, not an army exactly, but let's just say a group of people with a purpose of preserving life on our planet.
Oh, yes.
Who really relate with one another that way as peers and professionals, who admire one another for their contributions. Some people call this their tribe. It's true, we need a tribe, but we need a universal tribe. And yoga is really based on principles that are so universal that whoever joins that tribe is welcome everywhere in the cosmos.
Right.
There's no group that's been excluded.
Right.
So yoga is not exclusionary. And when everyone gets that, then knowledge won't seem like it's hypercritical. It'll seem like it's an empowerment because it's universal knowledge. It's not exclusionary knowledge.
Right.
And that's the most important thing I can say about the knowledge part. Don't make it exclusionary or see it that way. Think we're naming universal truths so that we can pass those truths around better by having consistent names for them. So Atma. And another one is that there's a consciousness that pervades all of life, which is called Paramatma. So however you want to see the Supreme, which is your ultimate choice, Paramatma just means that great consciousness that pervades the whole universe, as if the universe was a being.
Right.
So here we are, little beings inside of a big being. Okay, then I can talk to Paramatma, feel at home, feel friendly, and with those names, I'm the Atma, you're Paramatma, we can have that conversation more easily.
Yes.
And yet it doesn't become sectarian, and it doesn't become dangerous, and it doesn't become exclusionary. Nobody is not inside of Paramatma.
Right. We're all in this together.
We're all in this
The entire universe. So this
Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the acknowledgement. And right back at you. I mean, as soon as I saw you on the schedule, I was like, this guy, I need to talk to him because he's talking about all the things I want to talk about and on such a deep level, and you know, so much knowledge and wisdom that you're sharing. And I thank you for the programs that you're creating. And I really invite the people listening that are called to this, that are called to deepening their yoga practice or deepening their wisdom around it, to look up Jeffrey's website. I'll put links in the show notes to everything that he's offering. He has so many amazing offerings. And you know, we are the ones we've been waiting for. It's the yogis. It's our time to rise up, to get activated, to really activate. I focus a lot on the throat chakra because this is our voice, right? And that's what I'm doing with this podcast, and this is what you're doing with your teaching and your speaking. And as yogis, this is part of it. If you're going to be on the yogic path, you got to have that throat chakra activated and be using that voice to create the change and to create the world that we want to see.
Great. Well, I'm so inspired by what you're doing. I'm going to give you a present. And it's a yogic saying about the voice and the ears.
Okay.
And it's how to direct your life through this process.
Okay.
And the saying is, whatever the tongue talks about, the ears have to listen to. Whatever the ears listen to, the mind has to think about. Whatever the mind thinks about long enough, your body will do. And whatever your body does, you will become. So the first two steps in yoga, according to all the yogic teachers, is Shravanam, Kirtanam. Correct hearing and correct speaking. Whether it's a mantra, or a sound vibration, or a kirtan, or knowledge, Shravanam, Kirtanam.
Perfect place to end. Thank you so much for that nugget and that gift at the end, and thank you again for everything that you're doing.
And namaste, and thank you.
Namaste. Thanks so much for answering the call to be here today. I'm so glad you're part of our tribe of activated rainbow warriors. If you found the show in any way empowering or inspiring, I would be so grateful if you would share the show on social media or with friends and family that you think would benefit from these conversations. And also, rate and review the show in iTunes. This is really the very best way to help support the show and help us get noticed by others who are looking for the sort of content that we're sharing. Now notice there are no outside ads playing here. That's because the show is supported by you, the listener. You can become a patron of the show with a small monthly donation by checking out the perks on our Patreon page at patreon.com/visionary lifestyle and signing up there. There's also a one-time donation button on the podcast page of the website if that suits you better. And just so you know, your donations help to cover the necessary out-of-pocket monthly expenses to produce the show and will also help us grow so we can inspire and educate even more people. And hey tribe, I'd love to hear from you. Visit me at visionary-lifestyle.com and please tell me your comments and questions. I really look forward to connecting with you. I love you. Namaste.